Mohammed Zubair, alt news fact checker, will finally be a free man on bail. That relief came from the Supreme Court today, triggering a nationwide debate about personal liberty and whether the courts had done enough to, in fact, protect Mr. Zubair's personal liberty. The Supreme Court had a number of critical conclusions in its judgment. It also transferred all of the multiple cases against Mohammed Zubair to the Delhi police. On the program today, we will be talking to senior advocate Vrinda Grover, who represented Mohammed Zubair in the Supreme Court and was able to secure this relief after days for Mr. Zubair, who has become a kind of polarizing figure with so many rooting for him on Twitter, and of course, on the other side of the ideological trenches, others gunning for him as well. Vrinda, welcome to the program. And for the benefit of our audience who's just tuning in, I just want to take us through the key observations that were made by the three-judge bench. The court said that there was no justification for the continued custody of Zubair. This was a court that was a three-judge bench. Justice Chandrachud was among the judges on this bench, a case that was fought, as I said, by Vrinda Grover. The Supreme Court reminded the country that the power of arrest must be exercised sparingly, an all too important lesson given what we see happening with many of our courts, especially at the lower court level. The Supreme Court went on to actually say, and this is critically important, that the court will not stop Mohammed Zubair from tweeting. This is really, really important because it was a plea made by the law officers of the Uttar Pradesh government. Justice Chandrachud observed that it would be like telling a lawyer to not argue. It would be akin to that. So Mohammed Zubair will be free to return to his identity as Zubair on Twitter and continue to, if he so chooses, call out fake news. And finally, the special investigative team that was set up by the UP government to investigate 6 different cases against Zubair has been disbanded. It's been called redundant. All of those cases have now been transferred to the Delhi police, which will be looking at these cases. And the Supreme Court reminded us that the heart of this debate was the principle of personal liberty. So Vrinda Grover, congratulations. It's an important victory, not just for you and Mohammed Zubair, but for the principles that are involved at it. Would you say your primary feeling is one of relief? Because you've had to fight long and hard to secure this relief. And let's remind ourselves that this is interim bail. This is not a conclusive order.
Well, there is relief as a lawyer, certainly, because my client will, Mohammed Zubair, a fact checker, will walk out of the hard jail today, and he will not be compelled to be taken around court after court, prison after prison in Uttar Pradesh, and mired in multiple criminal proceedings. So there is relief. But I think also the bench, the three-judge bench headed by Honorable Justice Chandrachud, has actually spoken today and once again informed us and encouraged us that the freedoms that we enjoy, they cannot be either throttled, nor can the state use the criminal law machinery in a manner where there is a hint of an abuse of that. And if there are inconvenient facts or inconvenient voices in democracy, this is not even about dissent. This is about a person who does fact checking, who says something. And I think we need to understand that in a democracy, misinformation and false propaganda can actually be a policy used by certain persons or organizations or associations. Therefore, this is an inconvenient fact checker. But an inconvenient fact checker cannot be muzzled by abusing the law. And that is what the Honorable Supreme Court has done today, and has therefore clubbed all the cases and put them in one place, so that even if any legal process has to continue, it cannot become a method of harassing him. And his liberty cannot be repeatedly curtailed in this manner, because it is not just about the individual. We know that this has a chilling effect on society, and that would be very unwelcome. Therefore, the observation made by the court, which I think is very, very important for the state to heed, that the power of arrest must be used sparingly. And I hope the state will heed this.
One of the most important sort of decisions by the court, apart from reminding the country and law enforcement agencies that the power of arrest must be used sparingly, is the court's refusal to put any curtailment on Mr. Zubair's freedom to tweet. Justice Chandrachud compared this to asking a lawyer to not argue, to asking a journalist to not write, and he flatly refused, saying you cannot anticipatorily interdict this freedom of speech. The laws of the land prevail as they always do. Are you relieved by that? Because there's a great, of course, we don't know what Zubair will choose to do once he walks out. It's been traumatic. He's gone in, for a number of days. We don't know how he will exercise that right, but the court has protected that right.
Absolutely. I think what the court has said very categorically, and this actually, at least as far as my contentions and arguments that I've advanced repeatedly, and those tweets are all in the public domain. Those tweets prima facie show that there has never been incitement of any kind by any tweet. So why should he suffer? And if the entire purpose of abusing the law and the power and the legal machinery was to silence him, then surely the court will not allow that. Because if he is not allowed to tweet or are not allowed to speak, then the state has achieved its purpose. Then the abuse of power by the state has actually achieved what it set out to do. And by saying that, of course, if he or any one of us says publicly or privately something that is falls foul of the law will take its course. But to say that in future you shall be gagged, how does how do our freedoms guaranteed under the Constitution? How do they in any way sit comfortably with that? Let me put a question here. One of his tweets, for instance, is about some men in saffron who have
Mhm.
actually made speeches which are extremely offensive and of a nature that would constitute an offense, including calling for rape of certain women, various kinds of violence is being incited, communities are being polarized. Have those people been gagged? Has anybody asked for their speech to be silenced? Why would the state want Mohammed Zubair, none of whose speeches, and I say this with full responsibility, will ever withstand any judicial scrutiny? So, why should the state be allowed to abuse this power? As I said, it's an inconvenient voice. There
Yeah.
must be inconvenient voices in a democracy.
I agree with you, and yet, despite the fact that the Supreme Court has laid down first principles again today, if we go back to one of the tweets that he faces criminal prosecution for, the so-called hatemongers tweet, and if we can just bring that up on our screen, what is Mr. Zubair actually doing here? He is calling out men who are facing charges of hate. Right? It's not. It would be different if they weren't. They
They've
are
been
facing
arrested
charges of. They've been arrested. They have faced charges of
and
hate
they've
given
been
regard.
granted bail, of course.
Yes, and they're out on bail. Now, he's being he what should they be called if they're not called hate mongers? And the fact that that could be turned into a criminal case, does that alarm you? Does that concern you?
It alarms me a lot. And it alarms me not just for Zubair, it alarms me for free speech in this country. And that's why I'm saying this is not about dissent. This is about gagging Indian citizens. And that is my concern. Democracy only survives when all of us can speak. If somebody is going to commit a crime, I will call them out. It is actually my duty. We've heard the state and the government repeatedly emphasize on fundamental duties. What are the fundamental duties of a citizen in a democracy? I want to ask. To be silent, to allow persons to spew venom, to allow persons to polarize communities? No. It is the duty of a citizen to place accurate facts for an informed citizenry. And in the age of digital media, we need fact checkers so that we are not misinformed. These are not, so just as freedom of the press today must actually encompass all this. And I worry for how the state is brazenly and with impunity repeatedly adopting this ploy. And what is the impact it's having on our democracy as a whole. And the Supreme Court has today, in a very timely intervention, once again reiterated we only have the operative part of the order. The rest of
Yeah.
the order will be, the judgment will be dictated and made available later. But I really think it's important for the state to 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 be to understand what the court is underscoring and underlining for them, and then actually to adhere to it. Lawlessness of the state does not bode well for us.
And have we seen lawlessness of the state in all of these charges against Zubair?
Absolutely. Each and every one of them. And look at the pattern. And that is why the observation made by the court on the early hearing also, that this vicious cycle has to end. The moment I secure bail in one, dormant FIRs from 2021, May, June, August, September, no movement taking place because there isn't a case to make out. And what are the charges? Maximum punishment 3 years. The court keeps saying, do not arrest, not just now, but in Arnesh Kumar. Repeatedly, the court has said this. Why is it that
The Chief Justice just lamented. The Chief Justice himself just lamented it. So, the fact that the state of under trials and how needless arrests were being done, why is that not a cue down the chain, you think?
that is exactly the point. So, what is the police leadership doing? What are the senior police officers doing? There is arbitrary, indiscriminate, unnecessary arrest taking place. What does the police leadership do? What does the political executive do? We don't hear them. Why is the Supreme Court having to reiterate this over and over again? And I think it's important for the state to observe the rule of law.
Yeah, as you said, this is in your words about the lawlessness of the state in this entire stack up of cases against Zubair. But let me ask you this: there has been some disquiet expressed by very well respected voices from your community. Justice Deepa Gupta, for one, a retired judge of the Supreme Court, who in an interview to me said that the courts, this was of course before the Supreme Court intervention, he believed that the courts had failed to uphold the principles of human rights when it came to the Zubair case. He also juxtaposed it with the Nupur Sharma case, the now suspended BJP spokeswoman, and her comments on the Prophet, and said that while Nupur had said something much more than Zubair, he thought she should not be arrested either. The Supreme Court this week also offered Nupur Sharma protection from arrest. How do you see this constant, very, very shrill kind of juxtaposition of these cases? Because let us remind our audience that it was Zubair who first called out Nupur Sharma for her comments on the Prophet on a primetime television show.
So I don't think one should ever juxtapose freedoms and civil liberties of one individual or one group against the other. I would never prescribe to such a formula. Everyone's freedoms and civil liberties must be protected, must be guaranteed. The television show on which Nupur Sharma made some remarks and comments, which did cause unrest. I think when you are as a spokesperson of a political party saying something in public on a television news channel, then you have to measure your words, and you have to ensure that you are not creating unrest or deliberately being offensive. Having said which, does it call for arrest? I do not subscribe to blasphemy laws. I do
Right.
not subscribe to arrest of Nupur Sharma. I do think that Nupur Sharma has to discharge a responsibility. And the party has taken action against her, actually, which to me reads as they thought her to be irresponsible and wrong in the way she spoke. Should she be given the same legal remedies that are available in law? Of course, absolutely. And this is where the distinction lies. The state today is not dealing with citizens with an even hand. Many of us continue to say the law must apply equally to all. I don't care what his or hers ideological affiliation or any other context is. The law cannot be subservient to these ideas.
Are you saying, or would you say, the state has not been even handed with Nupur Sharma and Mohammed Zubair? And I ask you this as those visuals come live from outside Delhi's Tihar jail, where Mr. Zubair will walk out once all formalities are completed by Vrinda Grover's team. Would you say the state has not been even handed
Well, you see,
in these
there is
two
not
cases?
a single tweet of Zubair's which promotes ill will, incites hatred, or in any way insults any religion or religious feeling. Why did the state then lodge these innumerable cases against him? Why has he suffered incarceration from 27th June onwards? Why is he why did we have to approach the court? It should never have happened.
Yeah. But given the fact that the cliche of our times now is that the process is the punishment, and thank you for actually saying that, whether or wherever one may stand politically, the law has to be even-handed, the state has to be even-handed. The point is that we are caught in this vicious cycle also of whatabouteries. You say Mohammed Zubair, and someone will say Ketki Chitale, who also faces multiple
Yes,
FIRs for lampooning Sharad Pawar in Maharashtra.
she should never have been arrested. It is an absolute abuse of power by the Maharashtra government. And I say this categorically, just as I said that picking up people for sedition, for Hanuman Chalisa, was completely wrong in law. It is indefensible. I don't care what is the ideology of the state. This is abuse of power by the state. Having said which, the state is not acting with an even hand at all anymore. The state is targeting people. The state is targeting inconvenient voices. The state is targeting persons on the basis of their ideology, viewpoints, and faith. That is what is troublesome today.
Do you believe Mohammed Zubair was targeted for his faith or for his criticism of the Modi government? He makes no bones
I
about the
can't delve
fact.
into the minds of the state. I think he's an inconvenient, bold, honest, courageous, significant voice that Indian democracy needs, and they try to shut it down. The Supreme Court has said that these voices must be allowed to speak.
Do you feel the disquiet that Justice Gupta felt about the courts and the courts having failed to uphold principles of human rights? In another case, Zubair was represented by a colleague of yours, Colin Gonsalves, who lamented in general terms, not in this case, about what he called the increasing gap between the executive and the judiciary.
Actually don't like making sweeping statements about the state of the judiciary. Uh, I engage with the legal system regularly, and I think these are engagements with institutions. And yes, there are times when one feels that the court needs to have done more. The court itself has said that in the past it perhaps did not stand for certain human rights during the emergency, for instance. But I think these are constant, continuous engagements with all institutions. What one needs to actually pinpoint here is, what is the state doing in the midst of all this? What is the government doing?
Yeah. And what would you say about that? Because I think the biggest or the most sort of important and critical thing that you have said, and the court did not go so far today, at least from the bits of the order we've seen, is what you call the lawlessness of the state. Basically, what you know now is that it doesn't matter if you Mohammed Zubair or Ketiki Chitale, it doesn't matter if you like the BJP or like Sharad Pawar. If a law enforcement agency decides to come after you, it simply can, whether or not you've actually broken a law. That to me is the most chilling impact of both of these cases or any case like this.
I totally agree with you. And I think that is why in Indian democracy, when we say we inherited a colonial legal system, I think in this system, citizens have to stop being looked with suspicion. The criminal legal machinery looks at all citizens with suspicion. I have the presumption of innocence is absolutely enshrined in the Constitution, and yet the way the process is working, the way the law enforcement and the investigation is working, is as though the citizen is the suspect. The power is with the state. The state must be in the dock and the citizens. Their power of the state is untrammeled and it must be hedged in, it must be curbed. Law enforcement officials who transgress power, who transgress authority, they have to be called to account. We have to stop talking about police reform. We have to start talking about police accountability. And if the orders are coming from the political executive, then they should let us know that is the political executive asking us, asking the police to actually commit illegal acts against citizens. The Constitution places the citizen at the heart and puts checks on the powers of the state. That is what must be restored.
You made a comment in that response saying that actually those who transgress authority should be punished. So let me ask you this. Having secured bail for Mohammed Zubair, and those are again live visuals from Delhi's Tihar jail, are you going to push, maybe once the rest of this case is resolved, and it does turn out that there is no case against Zubair, are you going to push for damages or accountability from the police, multiple police forces or police officers rather, who decided to go against him with no basis, if that is indeed the finding eventually?
So there are two things I would say here. Firstly, we have a long way to go. We've only got all the cases put in Delhi. We still have to see how to take the cases forward. It is not really possible to get this kind of explicit finding. These are, secondly, as a matter of principle, I believe that these are actions that the state needs to take on its own. You cannot put the burden of this on the person who has been incarcerated. It's like telling the victim of torture, now turn around, go and prosecute them. They won't do it. It can't be done. This is the job of the state. The state needs to show to us that it stands for citizens, not in speeches, not in words, but in action. That is when we will know that the state actually stands, the government stands for the people, not in slogans, but in deeds.
Let me ask you a last question before we close. I know a lot of people would want to know how Mohammed Zubair is doing. You've been meeting him. How is he? What is his mental state? Is he nervous? Is he angry? Is he anxious? Does he plan to come back all guns blazing online? Give us a sense of how he's doing.
I have no idea. I was in court. I appeared in court.
No, not today, but over the last some days.
I have not met him for many days. They've been doing a little bit of a UP tour with him. So I've not met him at all. And when he comes out, he's an independent-minded man. He will take his own decisions.
Well, thank you, Vrinda Grover. I think you remind us that this is not about an individual. This is actually about all of us. I always say to people who think this happens to other people that tomorrow it can happen to you or me. Whether you look at Maharashtra, you look at Delhi, or you look at UP, you can pick up multiple examples. It's the principle that's at stake. The Supreme Court has reminded us of those first principles of a democracy today. And I do hope that message goes down the chain. Thank you very much, Vrinda Grover, securing bail and that important judgment from the Supreme Court today for Alt News fact checker Mohammed Zubair. Thank you and take care.
Thanks, Barkha.
Thanks. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mohd Story and support independent, robust journalism.